Glad you can make it a day with us today on Earth File. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ayola Kasim. Once an emerging threat, wildlife and forest crime today has transformed into one of the largest transnational organized crime activities alongside drug trafficking, arms, and trafficking in human beings. Beyond immediate environmental impacts, the illegal trade in natural resources is depriving developing economies of billions of dollars in lost revenues. Here in Nigeria, poorly managed logging and increasing needs for agricultural land are fragmenting the country's remaining forests. Protected areas are also becoming ever more isolated with few resources or qualified staff in place to encourage sustainable management. We will be looking at the various challenges facing forest conservation in Nigeria today on the program. Do stay with us. Climate change is arguably the most significant conservation challenge we face today. Global warming threatens the integrity of marine and terrestrial habitats and interrupts natural cycles such as migration and hibernation. Scientists estimate that as much as 20% of annual global carbon dioxide emissions are caused by the fragmentation and clearing of forests, especially in tropical areas. Healthy forests can store carbon dioxide in vast reserves and prevent it from being released into the atmosphere. Protecting an intact forest keeps its store of carbon from heating the planet. In addition to its environmental value, the sequestration of carbon has an economic value, which allows us to create an even greater incentive for conservation.
The capacity of the planet to recycle the carbon pollution has been overstretched. And she's no longer able to recycle it, especially as we're destroying forests at a very, very fast rate. So the only thing left is to ensure that we reduce the carbon waste, that we reduce this emission of carbon into the atmosphere. And of course, when we look at where is all the carbon coming from, the vast majority of it is coming from burning fossil fuel. So we have no choice. It is there right in front of us. If we don't do something very dramatically, very soon, we're going to totally compromise the capability of this wonderful planet Earth to give us any type of decent quality of life. And it's not just on the Earth, but it's also in the oceans.
Conservationists work across the globe to combat the effect of climate change on wildlife and wild places. Conservationists also work on the ground with communities that depend on natural resources to help them find mutually beneficial solutions to relieve the stress on fragile ecosystems. They work closely with governments and corporations to reduce and offset carbon emissions. Protecting the world's remaining forests from destruction is an important tool for stemming the harmful effect of greenhouse gas emissions. Also, directly or indirectly, we all depend on Earth's resources for our livelihoods and our survival. People around the world fish, farm, log, and hunt for food, shelter, and other necessities for their families and communities. However, these resources are finite. If we harvest and use them in unsustainable ways, the resources we need will eventually run out.
If we go by the way we are going, of at least impacting, using about 18 billion global per hectares of land, and the whole world, global per hectares is just 12 billion. The meaning of it is that we are over, stretching the threshold. And at the end of the day, we have to pay the price. So we need to ask, where are we going to get the extra land to use? How do we, as human beings of this race, want to change our patterns of resource use and burning of fossil fuels, our need for water, our need for land for agriculture, for food security, our need for land for everything we do, for infrastructure. The third thing that is important is that I think about 2 years ago, the world celebrated having the 7 billion population. And the population will continue growing. If it's not, we have to look at that too as an index of, okay, how many of us will continue to be in 2050, and we are still going to be having the same finite land. God has not created more land to add to it, and we've not got the technology to increase in the hectareage of land, and we still continue with this consumption pattern. Then in Europe, in America, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, and in other parts of the world, there is need for a global action with local action. What people used to say is global idea, local action. I think now it's going to be global action, local action. If they are not connected, at the end of the day, if anyone, either in America or Europe, thinks, okay, we can just do the things the way we want, or Africa, it's a price that everyone has to pay.
Nigeria, home to Africa's large human and its largest economy, has also retained vibrant wilderness. The country's forests and savanna parks and wetlands rank among the continent's most important. Nigeria's rural populations depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, eking out a living on typically small farms, many of which are expanding into previously remote forested areas. This pronounced expansion in Nigeria is causing habitat fragmentation and inevitable human-wildlife conflicts. Nigeria's biologically diverse landscape encompasses lowland and mountain rainforests, mangroves, swamps, and mountain grasslands. Yet, the proliferation of subsistence farms and large-scale timber harvesting forecast bad news for native wildlife, particularly the African elephant and the extremely rare cross-river gorilla. Gorillas and elephants need large, continuous ranges to survive. Given the dangers of ignoring the threats to the ecosystem from acute depletion of some plants and animals, efforts were made in the past